concerned us as we spoke, or how young people today can access through iTunes the music of neo-Nazi groups like Screwdriver, listen to that music without any filtering material that tells them what it is they're listening to, or allows their parents to know what it is they've been given access to. In other words, we have created the great leveler, the Internet. We understood in our discussion that there is no single strategy that can conceivably solve this problem, nor should we expect to be able to solve this problem, but we identified, Mr. Chair, 6 areas where we believe as a group that much more can and should be done. The first we called education literacy, and essentially it means that we must confront the fact that for young people today and for the very foreseeable future, their information, news, research, and entertainment will largely, if not exclusively, come from cyberspace. How then are they to be educated about understanding what they're seeing, what they're reading, what they're listening to, what they're viewing? The second area was to recognize that all of us in the community of conscience, represented by the parliamentarians and experts, must grapple with the fact that the Internet is simply not out there. It's here. It confronts us. It's an essential part of the challenge we face under the rubric of this conference's title, and that therefore this must not be simply a hobby for some to tackle the racists and the anti-Semites, but a more collective, thought-through, organized strategy on the part of us all. Otherwise, we're going to face an ever steeper climb. Thirdly, we must also recognize the fact that much of the key to this rests with the service providers, those who give the websites, if you will, their space, the landlords of cyberspace, so to speak. Some work has been done in this with regard to provisions in contracts for accessing sites, but much more needs to be done. Internet service providers must take responsibility for the material that they sponsor or they provide space for, and more work needs to be done. Fourth, we learned from the editor of Comment is Free of The Guardian that last month alone, to give you a sense of magnitude, more than 30 million unique visitors came to Comment is Free on The Guardian. I repeat, 30 million unique visitors. This is far more than the circulation of any newspaper, any magazine on the face of the earth. And they are not the largest, but they are certainly among the biggest. And he spoke with us very frankly about the kind of guidelines that they've had to establish internally at The Guardian in order to grapple with what is and is not anti-Semitism, what is and is not acceptable for posting on their website. We need to engage in more discussions with media outlets like The Guardian in order to learn what they are doing. And the key, as they pointed out to us, was training the moderators who are the first to see the submissions and those who make the decision about whether or not to post those submissions on the website. Bearing in mind that this is now a 24/7 business, as he pointed out. The newspaper was published once a day, 6 days a week. The Internet is 24/7, 365 days of the year. Fifth, and it was referred to earlier by Aviva Rosh-Shachter of Israel, the issue of laws, conventions, and protocols. We look particularly at the Council of Europe Convention on Cybercrime, the additional protocol on cyber hate, and secondly at the European Framework Decision of 2007. Many countries have signed, but not all. Some countries have ratified, but fewer than the signatories. And even ratification, we discussed, does not necessarily assure enforcement. It was the view of our group that signature, ratification, and no less enforcement are essential to the equation by all nations, and of course not just on the European continent. We explored examples in Australia, Canada, France, the Netherlands, and the UK about seeking to enforce punishable offenses of violation of incitement rules on the Internet. And last, Mr. Chair, we spoke about drawing upon the expertise of organizations and institutions that focus on anti-racism and anti-Semitism on the web. There are those groups with vast experience today, and they can be helpful particularly to responsible service providers, responsible media outlets who are on this new frontier and need the experience and expertise of those who've dealt with these issues of racism and anti-Semitism, Holocaust denial, and other manifestations of racism and hatred, and who can narrow the space for them without forcing them to learn from the beginning, because so much work has been done, including by those on our panel and those who filled our room to overflowing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, David. Abraham Foxman, please.
Mr. Chair, thank you. We had a brilliant panel. I will just mention their names: Dennis McShane, Luke Akers, Dean Godson, and Herschel Ezrin. As brilliant as it was, most of the things that I have heard earlier today were discussed, and I will, in the interest of brevity, submit the recommendations in writing for others to consider. I will, Mr. Chairman, take 3 minutes, with your permission, for a personal observation. I am a survivor of the Holocaust, and being privileged to partake in these deliberations, I am overcome by the seriousness, the goodwill, the commitment, and so overwhelmed by that haunting question: what if then, somewhere, maybe not in London, in some community somewhere, 5 or 10 or 20 parliamentarians of goodwill would have come together to ponder the questions of anti-Semitism. In all my 44 years as the Anti-Defamation League, monitoring and exposing and combating anti-Semitism, I have never been so worried about the safety and well-being of world Jewry as I am today. It is as if a floodgates have been opened, as if there's an open season declared on world Jewry, a new legitimacy. There is no country in the world today, from Austria to Zimbabwe, that is not experiencing this returning virulent virus that preoccupies us today. There is not even a pretense that this is a political issue, that Israel is wrong, evil, satanic, a violator of international human rights and international law. That has now become givens. And now the only issue is how responsible are the Turkish, French, Argentinian, Spanish, South African, British, Venezuelan, and other Jewish communities. It is today a clear and present risk. And so there have been other conferences, very important conferences in Vienna, Berlin, Brussels, Bucharest, Warsaw, Jerusalem, but this is unlike the other conferences. The other conferences were more academic, more programmatic, more in the long run. This is a conference in a critical time. It is the worst time since that